You know, for the last 2,000 years, there's been this hidden pattern playing out behind the scenes. It's got nothing to do with politics or ideologies or even specific leaders. It's all about math. And according to the historical analysis we're digging into today, this exact mathematical pattern has triggered a complete reset of civilization 5 separate times. I'm not talking about a reform, I mean a complete and total reset. Okay, let's get into it.
What if the rise and fall of entire empires wasn't random? What if it followed a predictable 6-stage blueprint? A blueprint that always ends with the total annihilation of debt and a gigantic transfer of wealth. Now, this isn't just some abstract theory. It's a historical pattern, and the source material we're looking at suggests we are living through it right now.
So, let's start with a number. A really, really big number. $300 trillion. That is the current best estimate for all the debt in the world. That's government, corporate, and personal. Just to put that in perspective, the entire global economy, everything we produce and sell in a year, is about 90 trillion. So the key takeaway here is we collectively owe more than 3 times what the entire planet produces annually. This is the mathematical reality we have to start with.
Okay, so to get our heads around this massive topic, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll introduce the core idea of this historical debt pattern. Then we'll walk step by step through the 6 stages that have repeated for centuries. We'll explore the only 3 ways this cycle has ever ended. After that, we'll map this ancient pattern onto our world to see exactly where we stand today. And finally, we'll look at who wins and who loses when the reset button finally gets pushed.
All right, let's dive right in. We need to start with the one core idea that this whole cycle is built on. It all revolves around a concept that sounds kind of fancy, but it's really just about what happens when the numbers simply don't add up anymore.
And that idea is something called a debt jubilee. Now, this isn't about being generous or forgiving. A debt jubilee is what happens when the math just breaks. It's the moment a society's debt gets so enormous that it physically cannot be paid back by the real economy. At that point, the debt has to be wiped away, one way or another.
And this quote right here just nails it. It lays out the choice in the starkest terms possible. Think of debt as a claim on stuff that will be produced in the future. But what happens when those claims get bigger than all the stuff that could ever possibly be produced? The system cracks. You just can't squeeze blood from the stone, and you can't pay back trillions in debt with an economy that isn't growing fast enough. The math is brutal. Either the debt gets erased, or the whole economic engine just grinds to a halt.
Okay, so how on earth does a society get to that breaking point? Well, it doesn't happen overnight. It turns out it's a super predictable 6-stage process, a blueprint that is played out time and again in places like ancient Rome, medieval Europe, revolutionary France, and Weimar Germany. Let's see how it works. So, here it is, the roadmap of the entire cycle. It always kicks off with a big boom, fueled by easy credit, which creates this amazing illusion of prosperity. Then, kind of quietly, debt grows past a critical tipping point. Pretty soon after that, just paying the interest on the old debt starts to eat up all the new economic growth. That's the uh-oh moment, when everyone realizes the debt is mathematically impossible to repay. That, of course, leads to intense political fighting, and finally, you get stage 6, the reset, where the debt just gets wiped off the books.
Stage 1. This part always feels amazing while it's happening. In Rome, they were building aqueducts and holding these magnificent games, all on credit. In medieval Europe, you had kings funding huge wars with loans from Italian bankers. In France, the aristocracy was building palaces like Versailles and living these incredible lives, all financed by more and more debt. In every single case, it looked like a golden age, but it was all an illusion, built by pulling prosperity from the future into the present.
Then comes stage 2. This is where the music starts to slow down a bit. Economists have found this kind of magic tipping point. When a country's total debt is 2.5 times larger than its entire economic output for a year, that's the debt to GDP ratio, the debt stops being fuel for growth and starts becoming an anchor that strangles it. By 33 AD, Rome was drowning in private debt. In 1345, the King of England owed more than his entire kingdom made in a year. And, well, after 2008, the modern world blew right past that 250% line and never looked back.
And then we hit stage 3. Now this one is absolutely critical. This is the mathematical point of no return. It's called the debt trap, and it's just simple arithmetic. Imagine your economy grows by $2 trillion this year, but you have to pay $3 trillion in interest on your old debt while you're actually going backward. You can't grow your way out of the problem anymore. The only way to make those interest payments is to borrow even more money, which just makes the problem grow exponentially. The system basically turns into a Ponzi scheme.
So once you're in that trap, stages 4 and 5 are pretty much inevitable. This is where the math problem spills out into the streets and becomes a full-blown social crisis. First comes stage 4, the recognition. That's the moment everyone looks at the numbers and realizes, oh no, this is never getting paid back. Then comes stage 5, the political pressure. The debtors, who are usually the general public, start demanding relief. And the creditors, usually the wealthy, demand to be paid, often by pushing for higher taxes on everybody else. This conflict, debtors versus creditors, just tears society apart.
So, when a society is completely stuck with debts that can't be paid and two sides ready to tear each other apart, how does it end? Well, history shows us there are only 3 ways out. There is no magical fourth option, because in the end, the math always wins.
All right, path number 1 is hyperinflation. This is where the government just fires up the printing presses to pay its debts. So yeah, the debt technically gets paid, but it's with money that's become worthless. This completely wipes out anyone who saved cash. We saw this in Weimar Germany, where people were literally burning money for heat. Path number 2 is a jubilee, which is a more organized cancellation of debt, like the London Debt Agreement that forgave a huge chunk of Germany's debt after World War II. And then there's the third and darkest path, collapse. A catastrophe like a war or a plague just destroys the system, making all the debts totally meaningless.
Okay, we've got the 2,000-year-old blueprint. We know the 6 stages. Now for the big question. Where are we on this historical map? This is where it gets really interesting.
Let's run through the checklist, shall we? Stage 1, that massive global credit expansion from the 80s up to 2008? Yep, check. Stage 2, blowing past 250% global debt to GDP after the 2008 crisis? Check. Stage 3, entering the debt trap where interest payments started to outpace new growth, right around 2020? Check. Stage 4, the growing recognition, that uh-oh moment, that the global debt is unpayable. I'd say that's happening right now. And stage 5, the building political pressure from all sides. We see that in the headlines every single day, which leaves only one stage left, pending.
And if you're wondering why we're in stage 4, well, this chart says it all. This is the math of the debt trap, right now in real time. The global economy is creating about $2.7 trillion in new wealth each year. But the interest payments on all that existing debt are around $9 trillion a year. So for every $1 of new growth we create, we owe $3 in interest. You really don't need an economics degree to see that this just can't go on forever.
So if history is any guide, how long does this take to play out? Well, historically, once a society hits stage 3, that debt trap we talked about, the final reset in stage 6 tends to show up within about 3 to 7 years. The analysis we're looking at suggests we entered stage 3 around 2020. So based purely on that historical pattern, the window for a reset could be somewhere between now and 2027. Now, this isn't a prediction, but it is a reflection of the timeline this pattern has followed 5 times before.
So look, if some kind of reset isn't just a possibility but a historical probability, what does that actually mean for everyday people? For you, for me, for our families and our savings? Because every single one of these resets is also a massive and often pretty brutal transfer of wealth.
Okay, let's break down this great wealth transfer. On one side, you have the losers. These are the folks holding what feels like safe paper promises. Think cash in a savings account, government bonds, pensions. When the reset happens, usually through inflation, the buying power of these things just collapses. Lenders get their money back, sure, but it's money that buys a fraction of what it used to. On the other side, you have the winners. These are the people who owe money and own real things. If you've got a long-term fixed-rate mortgage, you get to pay back your loan with much cheaper devalued money. And if you own hard assets, things you can touch like real estate, gold, or a business that makes real stuff, their value tends to keep pace with or even beat inflation.
And you know, when you look back at these 5 resets throughout history, the pattern is just crystal clear. The things that felt safe, cash in the bank, government bonds, turned out to be the riskiest places to be. Real things, hard assets, tended to hold on to their value right through the chaos. And fixed-rate debt, which we usually think of as a liability, actually became a powerful tool as inflation just washed its real value away. The key point here is that the people who understood the pattern that was unfolding around them were able to prepare for what was coming.
And really, it all comes down to this one powerful idea. It's the perfect summary of this whole cycle. The debt doesn't get repaid in any way that matters. It gets erased. And when that happens, wealth doesn't just vanish, it moves. It flows from the people holding paper promises to the people holding real assets, from the lenders to the borrowers.
So there you have it.
We've walked through the 6-stage blueprint, we've seen it pop up again and again over 2,000 years, and we've mapped it onto our world today. The stages are clear, the math is undeniable, and the historical precedent is just incredibly powerful. All that's left is to watch as the final stage unfolds, but now, hopefully, with a much deeper understanding of how these cycles really work.
Look, if this explainer changed how you see our economy even just a little bit, make sure to subscribe and follow along with us. We're going to keep tracking this pattern as it develops, breaking down the complex events from history to the headlines. Thanks so much for watching.